It's Slate Night, the Film Fan Podcast. Now, here are your hosts, Corey and Mason.
Hello, and thanks for sitting down with us. This is our 9th episode of Slate Night, the Film Fan Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Mason Schmidt, here with my best bud, Corey Knudsen, as we get ready to talk about all things movies. As usual, tonight we will discuss what films we've seen lately, what new releases are on the horizon, an update and correction on some physical media releases, and the latest notable developments in the world of movies. But first, Corey, how have you been? Merry belated Christmas, and what are we drinking today?
Yeah, Merry Christmas to you, man. Merry Christmas to all of our 3 listeners.
Yeah.
Thanks to you guys. We appreciate it.
And to be inclusive, happy holidays to whatever other people believe in. I'm very naive.
Hanukkah and Kwanzaa. I see Hanukkah spelled with CH sometimes, so I wanted to really hit the Hanukkah.
When I see Kwanzaa spelled out, I only think Kwisatz Haderach from Dune. So
I think that's where it came from.
Probably.
I think Kwanzaa came from Frank Herbert's novel, Dune.
Probably.
Yeah,
yeah, definitely.
That's canonically how that happens.
Not bad at all.
Yeah. Anyways, what we're drinking this week is a Minnesota classic. We got the Grain Belt Nordeast Amber Lager, made by Schell Brewing Company out of New Ulm, Minnesota. Grain Belt, I mean, you got the big fucking sign in the Twin Cities here of Grain Belt, so everybody knows this. It's great. It's a classic. I love this beer.
I've only had Grain Belt Premium. I've never had Nordeast. This is awesome. And Grain Belt Premium is awesome. And like we brought it up last week talking about Jingle All the Way. There's a scene involving reindeer and Grain Belt beer. So thought it would be perfect to talk about that this week, as it is kind of what I think of as being the classic beer of Minnesota. But anyway, moving into what we've seen lately. Corey, take it away.
At least we watched a lot of stuff this week.
It was a big week.
Pretty busy week. So we're going to start off with movie that, if this doesn't get you in the Christmas holiday spirit, I don't know what will.
Heartwarming adventure.
Yeah, heartwarming adventure. Nosferatu, directed by Robert Eggers, who his previous 3 movies, The Witch, The Lighthouse, and The Northman.
Bangers.
Yeah, he's a very consistent director, at least for me. This movie got an all-star cast in it. Lily Rose Depp, Nicholas Hoult, Bill Skarsgård, Willem Dafoe, Ralph Ineson, Aaron Taylor Johnson, Emma Corrin. Simon McBurney has a really fun role in this movie as well. So he definitely knows how to get some A-plus talent for his movies. And this, I think we kind of mentioned it last week, but basic synopsis, it's a gothic tale of obsession between a haunted young woman and the terrifying vampire infatuated with her, causing untold horror in its wake. And I know that we've both been looking forward to this movie for a long time. Oh, yeah. Definitely one that we were excited to talk about today. I saw it on Christmas morning. I actually had to work on Christmas on night, so I saw this in the morning, which very interesting. Just as other people are opening presents with their kids, I'm just watching a vampire movie by myself in a theater. But you know what? Yeah. There's nowhere I'd rather be. So this movie worked incredibly well for me. I absolutely loved it. It is one of my favorite movies of the year. And what worked for me about it was the sense of dread and just the atmosphere of this movie. I really, really enjoyed. Robert Eggers has a great way of going into the past and really presenting the time period in an interesting and captivating way. All 4 of his movies don't take place in the present. So he really has an interest in going back in time and showing you these time periods and putting you in that setting. And I think this movie may be one of the best examples of that. And I just, all the technical aspects of this movie, the production design, the costumes, the cinematography by Jaron Blaschke is beautiful in this movie. And I think the thing that stuck out to me the most was the lighting in this movie. There's a lot of use of shadows. You see it in the trailer. There's like a shot of the hand going over the city. So just kind of, it's not a black and white movie, but there's sequences that are like almost black and white, and they just look absolutely beautiful. So I think all of those technical aspects come together to really make a visually accessible movie that I really, really enjoyed watching. And then for me, I thought that this movie worked really well on a character and a story level as well. I think that Lily Rose Depp is great in this movie as the lead, and Nicholas Hoult is kind of the co-lead in the movie. They kind of both lead it. And seeing their journey and seeing both of their relationships with Count Orlok, played by Bill Skarsgård, Bill Skarsgård.
Yeah, roll the R's.
He's doing his. I've been doing the voice all week of how he pronounces his R's, which is so funny to me. But aside from that, just seeing their relationship with him and seeing at least for me, the sense of dread and the impact of this kind of entity, this demon, entering this small village in like 1830s Germany, in this small German town, and seeing the impact that he has over the people of this town, I think worked really well. And this cast of characters is very diverse because they all have very different reactions to this dark force that's entering their lives. Where you have this crazy guy played by Willem Dafoe, who's, who has some very funny lines in the movie, kind of offers some comedic relief. And, he is obviously kind of into this whole mystical, demonic side, and he's trying to tell everybody about it. And then you've got a doctor played by Ralph Ineson, who is a little, he comes at it from a practical standpoint of like wanting to just heal people. He's very forward thinking about it. And then Lily Rose Depp, who's obviously has a very strong connection with Count Orlok, and Aaron Taylor Johnson plays a friend of Lily Rose Depp and Nicholas Holt's characters, and he is a non-believer in this and very skeptical about it. So I think all those different perspectives of these characters provide a really nice balance and a necessary balance where you see these different reactions and how people would, maybe react at this time of either believing it hardcore or not believing it at all. So all of those different performances worked for me. I think the movie, for me, was paced really well. I really enjoyed just building up this sense of dread throughout the movie. And then you get to the end, and I think it is a very satisfying ending. And really my only little issues with the movie, it's not as scary as I thought it would be. So don't go in expecting a full-on horror movie, which I guess The Witch and The Lighthouse are kind of the same thing, where you maybe go in thinking it's going to be scarier, and it's not exactly that type of movie. And then the only other little thing I was going to mention is that I think we see Bill Skarsgård's character of Count Orlok too much in the movie. I think if he would have stayed in the shadows a little bit more, I would have preferred that. But really, everything else worked for me in this movie. And I know that Mason had a very different reaction to this movie. So I'm very curious to hear your side and what you think.
Well, this was one of the more anticipated films that I had on the latter half of 2024. I was kind of holding out on solidifying my top 10 in preparation for this movie coming out, because I figured that this would I was hoping gunning towards that top 5 spot, somewhere in there. I went and saw this just last night, actually, with my wife. We went to a late showing, and theater was packed, which made me, I was excited to see it. Also a little trepidatious going into a Robert Eggers movie and seeing a full crowd. And I'm like, I don't know how everyone's going to react, because I know when I saw The Lighthouse, I had a very vocal theater, and I heard people not like that movie throughout the movie. So going into this movie, like I said, very anticipated. I love all of Robert Eggers' previous works. Probably The Northman being my favorite of his. The Witch, I love that movie. I think that is just the perfect haunting witch film. It's I think, even though, like you said, it's not necessarily a straight up horror film, there are just really tense, bone chilling moments in that film, and I was kind of hoping that Nosferatu would be similar to that. The trailers I thought have been fantastic. It does have a great cast. Sitting down to watch it though, I was really disappointed by this film. I easily think that this is my least favorite of Eggers' films. I do think Nicholas Hoult, Bill Skarsgård, Willem Dafoe, Ralph Ineson, they give great performances. I think Lily Rose Depp, I think Aaron Taylor Johnson, horribly miscast in both of their roles. I think Lily Rose Depp was really inconsistent throughout the movie, and I thought in some scenes she was really flat and gave me nothing. And she just gave me big, white, doughy eyes, but not a lot of emotion, where I was like, I need more to connect to you, but I don't connect with you, and I don't really feel your struggle or your pain or your fear for Count Orlok and your connection with him. I'm not connecting with you. And then in scenes where she's almost possessed or taken over by this dark force and she's convulsing, I was like, this is laughable to me. I couldn't buy into that. Aaron Taylor Johnson, I do like what you said, and I agree with before I get into Aaron Taylor Johnson's performance, I do agree with the film doing a good job of giving different perspectives, especially with Willem Dafoe. He's more like fantastical and like he's not like an alchemist, but like looking into like dark arts and stuff like that. And Ralph Ineson has more of the practical, like scientific approach to things. I thought there were really cool approaches to like perceiving Count Orlok as a character. Nicholas Hoult gives maybe my favorite performance of his that I've seen, maybe aside from Juror Number 2. It's kind of...
He's having a great year.
He has a banger of a year. I actually, because of him now, I kind of want to go back and try and catch The Order. I know that was a smaller kind of crime thriller, but I think that'd be, with kind of the year he's been having, I kind of want to go back and see it. Great performances almost all around. Aaron Taylor Johnson, I could not get behind anything he was saying. Like, it just didn't fit for me. Every single line of his was delivered in such like a high-pitched, almost squeaky way that I couldn't get behind, and it just didn't feel authentic to me. Bill Skarsgård's great. The voice of Count Orlok is awesome. The look of Count Orlok, at least in his size and his like how just imposing this fucking creature is fantastic. I love his hands. You see a lot of his hands before you really see any part of his face or any other part of his body. His little prosthetic penis that you get a glimpse of was kind of interesting. But I didn't like the way his face looked. Like, I thought he looked like Rasputin. I've heard a lot and watched a lot about Robert Eggers' kind of inspiration as to looking at a lot of like the Scandinavian background of kind of the noblemen of this time and what Count Orlok would probably look like. And I get that, but it didn't work for me. I thought at least the appearance of his face, I thought was laughable. And like you said, I kind of wish they would have I wish they would have kind of kept that reveal of him longer. Because I was on board with the movie for most of the first act before I finally see Count Orlok, and I was like, it kind of deflated me. I was like, oh, like you showed me your hand right now. Like, what else is there to see? And I was waiting for this movie to prove to me that it was something good. I do think that the production design is fantastic. The costuming is fantastic. The cinematography is great. The performances just took me out. Performances, I should say, of Lily Rose Depp and Aaron Taylor Johnson, I should say, took me out. Willem Dafoe has one of my favorite line readings in this film, and it's just him offering alcohol to, I think, Aaron Taylor Johnson or Nicholas Hoult. I forget which one, but he just says, schnapps? And It was so out of nowhere, and just Willem Dafoe's craggly little fucking voice saying that.
It's after, like, they're talking about the demon and, like, how they can maybe beat this thing. It's that sort of thing, and then...
Very serious.
And then he just kind of stumbles over it. Schnapps?
Yeah. I was just like, what did he just say? So there's kind of weird bits of humor in this movie that some worked for me, some didn't. Similar to kind of Lighthouse and ain't a friend of my lobster or stuff like that. Like, just weird bits where I'm like, what is this? Like, it was kind of an interesting tone at times. Like you said, it wasn't really it's not a straight up horror film. It never scared me. It honestly bored me more than it scared me. I think this film is 2 hours and maybe 12 or 13 minutes, or I forget the official runtime. It is so slow moving. And I feel like you mentioned that the dread worked for you and kind of the building of dread worked for you. It kind of struggled for me. They talked a lot about him being such a threat and the scary thing. And you see a lot of visions of him kind of infecting these people's minds. But I feel like the film struggled with showing how imminent this threat was. They say, oh, he's coming soon. He's coming soon. We need to prepare. And I'm like, there's been like 40 minutes of just you guys talking about how to, I'm not seeing any, like, rush to this. Like, you get that schnapps scene in between some of these moments where I'm like, you guys, like, if you know what's coming and you suspect you know what's coming and you need to get ready for it, I'm not seeing that, like, haste, that real fear from you guys, which I get some of the characters are a little bit more trepidatious as to, like, the nature of Count Orlok and whatever. But it just, I don't think this film was anywhere near as interesting or as impactful as it could have been. I don't, like, hate it. I didn't have the best time watching it, and I don't know if I really want to rewatch it anytime soon. I'm sure down the line I might. What it did do for me is it made me really want to go back and watch all of the 1922 original Nosferatu. I've seen bits and pieces I mentioned in, like, film studies classes and stuff like that, like most film majors have. But it makes me really want to go back and rewatch that and see kind of how the story has changed over time or what kind of is different between these two different interpretations. I still am a fan of Eggers, and I think, like what you were saying, he's so good at just time periods, and I hope he never tells a movie in modern day, honestly, because he's so good at just really capturing a time period. But I think as a horror movie, this fails. As a movie with suspense, it failed. Some of the writing failed, and there was 2 bigger performances in this film that really did not work for me. And your monster wasn't scary to me, and his appearance didn't work for me. So I wanted it to be better. When the movie wrapped up, my wife looked at me, because I will say the ending of the film I really did enjoy. I liked the final shot especially. And there are some scenes where Lily Rose Depp kind of did work for me, especially in that final, I'd say 5 minutes. And that final shot, and then it cuts to black, and my wife looks over at me, and she's smiling, and I was like, oh, like, did you like it? She's like, I really liked it. Did you like it? I'm like, no. I actually kind of wanted to leave like an hour and 40 minutes into this movie, and she was like, really? So I was happy to see that she liked it. I was trying to like listen to the people around me to be like, how did you feel about it? Because it is kind of a hard movie to kind of figure out what the populace is going to think, but I know I'm kind of in the minority as to like my dislike for it. I did see John Campea talk about it briefly, and I kind of aligned with him, and I was like, thank you, someone that agrees with me. I don't feel too crazy about kind of the issues I've had with this movie. But it's an interesting movie because like I don't outright hate it. There's aspects of it that I'm like, ooh, there's something there. So it's a mixed bag when I was really hoping for this to be just a fucking home run for me this year.
Yeah. I'll be curious to see over time
how this
if
ages.
You like this movie more, if you like it less. I think another part that worked for me about this movie is that I'm not really a fan of typical vampire movies. I don't enjoy, like, obviously there's the fucking Twilight, but like aside from that, like the vampires like biting neck and like getting blood and like all that kind of typical vampire stuff that you see, I've never really been a fan of those type of movies. Even like The Lost Boys, which is a classic, I don't love it though.
Yeah, I don't either. I'm not a big fan. I don't think there's really ever been aside from one that stands out to me, I don't think there's really been a vampire in a film that scared me. Even as a kid, I don't think vampires have really scared me. But in Blade 2, the vampires where their jaw like opens up, those freaked me out a lot as a kid. So yeah, this movie had an uphill battle of trying to make vampires scary to me as something that's never really scared me. And I was really hoping that it could kind of do some damage there and give me some solid scares. There are a couple of jump scares that I was like, come on, Eggers, you're better than this. Like, I don't need this. Like, really build to something. And I feel like the film kind of fell flat in some areas like that for me.
Yeah, and kind of to the point, like, I feel like maybe that's why this movie worked for me so much, because I just have never been a fan of that, and I always liked the sense of how does this like entity impact these other people, not like the like blood and the gory vampire stuff you typically see. So I think that I just appreciated that a lot. And I'm gonna make a very weird comparison that I was just kind of thinking about with this movie that may sound weird at first, but I have reasons for it. This movie kind of reminded me in aspects of Dunkirk, in the sense that this movie isn't necessarily about the characters. It's not about the arcs of all of these specific characters. It's about the atmosphere. It's about the environment. Because when you watch Dunkirk, like, I don't know the characters' names in that movie. But it's about this bombing. It's about this event in this specific point in time. And you're along with these characters for the ride, and you are experiencing, in Dunkirk, obviously, the war and the horror of that. And then in this movie, you're experiencing a different type of horror with these characters and all of their different perceptions of this entity that's coming into their German town. So it's, I think, yes, the character arcs in this movie could be deeper. They could be more fleshed out all around. But I think, at least for me, the point of it was to see how Count Orlok infected all of them. And you even see parts of this movie where like the plague comes into
and I did like those parts too.
Yeah, it's kind of, we've had a lot of like kind of vampire Dracula stuff in the last couple of years, like Last Voyage of the Demeter, which
very underrated.
I kind of like that movie. Yeah.
And so, I like those aspects of this movie too, of seeing Count Orlok getting transferred basically to Visburg, this German town that they're living in.
So yeah, it was kind of, you see like the physical manifestation of this plague coming through with like the rats and everybody getting sick and the hospitals are like flooded. But But then you get the emotional impact of that too with these characters, and then especially with the ending too, which I think deals with some good themes about obsession and about relationships and sacrifice as well. So this one really worked for me. It's one of my favorites of the year, and it's definitely one that I want to rewatch soon, just to feel this experience again.
What I'm kind of gonna honestly just talking about it out loud with you again and kind of get more of your take. I think I might amend something that I said. I might have mentioned that I don't really think I really want to see this movie again. I think I might challenge myself actually to go see this movie again before I go on my honeymoon next week, because I think I want to see this movie again knowing what I know about it and having kind of those expectations, because I had sky high expectations, which I feel like I'm not necessarily in the wrong to have, but
it's tough to
mitigate it or manage it, especially when it's like Eggers coming from what he has and the movie being so well marketed, the way just the team behind it. It's so hard to kind of expect anything less than excellence. So I think I'm going to challenge myself in these next couple of days, maybe even tomorrow. I might try and go catch this movie again in theaters and just see if some of those things I had issues with, if they're still prevalent through a rewatch. Because I'm one of those people, I don't like not liking things unless the movie is Tar. I love not liking that movie. And like I said, I'm a mixed bag on this. And I was expecting more of a reaction in the positive, a more of aggressive reaction of like, wow, I love this right away. And I didn't get that really for most of it. So I think I am going to challenge myself to maybe rewatch this film this upcoming week. But moving on from Nosferatu, a little bit of a long-winded review, but it was a fun one. It's a great movie to kind of get towards the end of the year for us to kind of talk about, especially moving into kind of our rankings for the. Yeah,
and we don't typically disagree that too much on movies, so it's kind of fun.
We usually end up on the same side of the spectrum. It's just usually to what degree. So to see us kind of disagree, it's fun. Those conversations are a little bit more interesting. Yeah. A movie I did catch, which I was again not really in the biggest rush to go out and see, but I had some free time. I went and saw A Complete Unknown, directed by James Mangold, the great James Mangold, starring obviously Timothée Chalamet, Edward Norton, Monica Barbaro, I believe, and Elle Fanning. It is just basically the upcoming, or the story of Bob Dylan's, basically his busting onto the scene with his folk music and kind of his career and how it kind of culminates and evolves over time. And I've made this point clear that I'm not the biggest musical biopic person. I think the genre is kind of tired. It kind of follows the same formula. Damn it, did I fucking actually really enjoy this movie. Which I'm not mad about. I'm happy that I actually really like this movie. I'm a big Bob Dylan fan. We're Minnesota boys. We're drinking Grain Belt. Of course I love Bob Dylan. I love folk music. And I think that this film has some really great performances. Monica Barbaro stole every scene she was in for me. Timothée Chalamet is great. There are some scenes where I'm like, you are kind of doing an impression of Bob Dylan as opposed to, I feel like you being the character. It feels like you're just talking in his voice, like as opposed to really living in that person. Edward Norton's great. Elle Fanning is great as well. Her character kind of gets a little bit of a kind of sidelined, which I don't know. It's hard to critique because it's based on a true story, and I don't know necessarily all the details of the story with this person in Bob Dylan's life, so it's hard to kind of fault it, but also part of a adaptation is you need to make it what's best for on screen, even if that doesn't always coincide with what actually happened in real life. But this movie really worked for me. It doesn't follow the kind of formulaic downfall of an artist in like the third act of a biopic where it's, they had an alcohol dependency or an addiction issue or something. It was more just Bob Dylan breaking onto the scene with his folk music, just taking the world by storm, and then him being like, you know what, this is a film. It's a film about self-expression and just how that evolves over time. And even if that doesn't necessarily work for people, or the fact that your music evolves over time, and people are like, I want you to play your folk music. I want you to play the times they are changing. I don't want you to have electric guitar in your folk music. That's not folk music. And it's just like, he's like, fuck you, this is my music. I write what I write, I sing what I sing. Like, the conflict is relatively light in this film, but overall it really worked for me, and I think Timothée Chalamet gives a really good enigmatic performance of Bob Dylan and kind of lives up to that aura that the famous artist has of just kind of being a quirky asshole. So I really enjoyed the movie. Corey, I'm really excited for you to see this movie because I think if I like this movie, not liking typically musical biopics, I'm expecting you to like it. Also, before I throw it over to you, Boyd Holbrook is in this movie, and he is amazing as Johnny Cash, and I wish there was more of him in this movie. Corey, where is your anticipation for this film?
I've been really excited for this one for a long time. I know we've mentioned it a few times, but Timothée Chalamet was in the Twin Cities a few weeks back promoting this movie, so it's always cool to just see him at one of the theaters that we go to a lot. Mm-hmm. And I probably would have seen this movie by now, but I'm waiting to see it with my mom because she's really excited for it. She grew up on the Iron Range of Minnesota, where Bob Dylan is from. He grew up in Hibbing, went to Hibbing High School, so she obviously just kind of grew up in knowing that this big musical icon was from this very small part of the world. Yeah. And it's such a cool thing, and I'm really excited to see that with her, just to have that personal connection and see what she thinks about it. So I'm going to see that this upcoming week with her, and I'm very excited. James Mangold, obviously very established, like we've said before, and Timothée Chalamet is the music that I've heard, like just from the trailers and how his voice sounds singing that, I think sounds great. So
the music is great in the movie. He does a great job singing. I will say I think that this deserves to be on the same tier because I really love Walk the Line, the Johnny Cash film James Mangold did. I do believe that this is on that same level in terms of quality. I do really love Timothée Chalamet in this movie. If he does get a nomination, because I know he kind of is getting some recognition for his work this past year, I wish he would get a nomination for Paul Atreides in Dune Part 2 over this. I do think that there's more layers to that role. I would understand if he got a nomination for this film, but I overall would prefer it to be for Dune Part 2. One, I am also just really biased because Dune Part 2 is, I think, the best film ever made. Well, made since I've been alive. I also really did appreciate the film doesn't delve too much into like the upbringing, full background of Bob Dylan. It just starts and it's the 60s and he's on his way to go meet Edward Norton's character, and it's just boom, it just gets going, and they make references to his childhood, and he's like, no, people take what they want from their past and make up their own story. It doesn't matter where I come from. And I'm like, I really like the way that this movie is kind of combating the typical structure of a movie like this. So yeah, I'm very excited for you to see it.
Yeah, and I think you need to do that with especially musical biopics, just because we've seen so many of them, and you need to do something special like Walk the Line or Rocket Man, which does a lot of interesting stuff with its musical sequences. Mm-hmm. We've seen the story of the rise and fall of musical artists before, so bringing something interesting is kind of a must when you're adapting one of these. So I am excited to see it, and I will talk about it the next time we have an episode. Couple things that I saw this week. I watched a lot of stuff this week.
You did your homework this week. You went through it.
Went to see Sonic the Hedgehog 3, which I saw. Just want to give a shout out to. I don't like AMC theaters. I think I've said that on here before. If not, fuck the 20 minutes of trailers that they have. I hate that shit. It's awful. But I did see it at a Dolby Cinema theater at an AMC, which the sound and the audio. It's the same fucking thing. Sound in the picture was incredible in that theater, which for like Sonic 3, it was kind of fun with all the action sequences. But this is definitely my favorite of the three Sonic movies. I think it really just taps into like what you want to see from a Sonic movie. And that's just like all of the character, or like a lot of the big characters together. And like they're just fighting shit, and like you have Dr. Robotnik. Jim Carrey playing two roles is so much fun to see. He's having a great time. And I feel like through each Sonic movie, we've seen Jim Carrey get back to being more of like 90s Jim Carrey.
He's just having fun.
Because like the first movie, he's doing his fun thing. And like he's kind of on a leash a little bit, I think, because they weren't quite sure how that movie was going to, hit with audiences. But each one, they just keep letting him be like, no, you're Jim Carrey. Just do your thing. Have fun with it. Be goofy. Have a dance sequence towards the end for some reason, which I'm like, okay, sure. Does this need to be in the movie? Yeah. Not really, but sure, fuck it. Who cares? Also, I think this is the best of the three Sonic movies because the character of Shadow, really cool.
Yeah.
I think Keanu Reeves did a great job voicing the character. And I'll admittedly say, like, I didn't really play the Sonic games growing up, so I don't know a lot of these characters. But just Shadow's backstory for this movie. I was like, that's interesting. That's cool. I'm invested in this character. I understand the character. And, like, there's actually some, like, heartfelt moments that I didn't really expect with his backstory. So it was a really fun time. And, yeah, it's a good, it's a good, like, holiday movie, too, I think, for families to bring their kids to. And I don't think the adults will hate themselves watching this, like some animated movies or, you know, kid-friendly movies. But yeah, really enjoyed Sonic 3. I know you talked about it last week. You enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think it's the most streamlined of the three. It just gets right in and starts going. Like, it doesn't really take a whole lot of time to set up. We get away from a lot of the human characters that I feel like detract from the main story, typically. And they do actually a good job of really incorporating them into the action as opposed to like, hey, you're going to go to Hawaii for a whole different subplot. They really work, like, James Marsden's character into the story. And I think having dual-role Jim Carrey's is maybe one of the best things I've seen this year. Yeah, and the action was really fun. I think it's a very enjoyable film still. The comedy and really all of this franchise hasn't really worked for me just because I do think that does skew more towards the child-friendly, like, kind of goofy, almost slapstick humor. And it doesn't necessarily work for me, but I'm a kid at heart, and I love seeing Jim Carrey just chew scenery and have a dance-off scene with an older prosthetic version of himself. So, yeah, I think it's a great time, and especially around this time of year when it's families going out to theaters, I think that this is well worth your money. And I, as someone who hasn't seen Mufasa and doesn't plan on seeing Mufasa, I hope people see this instead of Mufasa.
Yes. It also, the theater I was in, there was a lot of families, a lot of kids in there, and hearing kids like really enjoy the movie, not only just like from the jokes, but reacting to like characters showing up and them being really excited, I think that adds a bit to like the experience. You're like, yeah, like I was that kid once, and you're like seeing like the Avengers on screen for the first time. It's like, oh shit! So it's that sort of thing where it just kind of is heartwarming, and yeah, it's really fun. It's enjoyable.
One thing I do want to mention, because you mentioned AMC, and AMC, while I do hate their trailers, they do a lot of times, at least near us, have really good screen and sound quality. So it's like, it's a double-edged sword of like, fuck, do I want to sit down through a half an hour trailers? Well, the quality of the screening is at least really good. One thing that Imagine Cinemas, which is a more Midwest-based theater chain, they're my theater of choice. The Imagine Theaters, I actually was a manager at an Imagine Theater in White Bear Lake. I love their theaters, but when I saw A Complete Unknown, what they did at the beginning of their trailer package, basically, was they had, I don't know who this guy is, but he came out, I'm sure he's like a higher up at Imagine, and he was like, hey, thanks for sitting down at Imagine. We are going to start our trailer package, so that gives you roughly 10 minutes. And I was like, whoa, look at you being like customer-facing and like helping us, like letting us know, like, this is going to be 10 minutes of trailers. If you need to go to the bathroom, if you need to go get drinks, do that. I still wish that they would put like a timer even in like one of the corners so you can kind of see a countdown of when the movie actually starts. But I was like, damn, that's like really cool. This is like a step forward, I think, for theaters being like, you know what, hey, there's a lot of trailers sometimes, like, this is how much time you have until the movie actually starts, so you don't need to bust your ass to be in here. So I thought that was really cool, and I just wanted to kind of shout that out.
Yeah.
Just because AMC usually is a half an hour of trailers, and it's just kind of rough. And if I knew going in when the movie actually started, fine. I'd be okay with it. But, yeah, it's something that I hope gets improved upon moving forward.
Yeah, that dude also comes back like right before the movie starts. It's like, hey, turn off your phones. Make sure everything's off. Don't talk. All that kind of stuff.
Which should be like second nature. People should know how to do that and know to do that without the reminder. But then you see that reminder come up and you see like a couple of the older people in the audience like, oh yeah, and they grab their phone, their screen lights up, and they like slide it over.
Some people need this reminder.
Yeah, I'm like, I forget about that. Like, I've seen 60 odd number of movies this year. Like, I know to turn my fucking phone off.
Right.
Whatever.
Yeah. Another one that I caught up on this week was Juror Number 2, which I know you talked about, I think, a couple weeks back. Mm-hmm. This is Clint Eastwood's latest movie, maybe his final movie. Who knows how long he's going to live. I love him, but he's old, man. He's fucking 90-something.
Yeah.
This movie's great. It's on HBO Max right now, so definitely go watch this. Mm-hmm. Again, Nicholas Hoult delivering a great performance. Toni Collette, Chris Messina, J.K. Simmons in this movie. It's essentially a juror serving in a high-profile murder trial, and he finds himself in a serious moral dilemma, one that could be used to sway the jury verdict and potentially convict or free the wrong killer. And I thought that this movie, I mean, I love courtroom dramas. That's one of my favorite, like, kind of subgenres of movies. And I think this movie worked really well. And I don't want to spoil it because I feel like not a lot of people have seen this movie.
Mm-mm.
But Nicholas Holt's connection to this case, I think, adds a really fresh element to the courtroom drama and to the kind of 12 Angry Men type of vibe that this movie's going for at times. I just think that his character and what his connection is to this case really brought a new dynamic to this movie and this type of movie that we've seen before. And you have Toni Collette in the movie as well, who's this attorney that is kind of on one side at the beginning and then gets more information and starts to investigate more stuff as the movie goes along. And you see her character change. So there's a lot of really great arcs in this movie, even if they aren't the deepest of arcs. It's like I really enjoyed watching their characters. And I think Clint Eastwood directs this movie with like some decent energy for a guy that's 90-something years old.
Yeah, he directs like he's 70.
Yeah, right, yeah. He directs like he's still a fucking American Sniper or something else, you know, $1 Million Baby, whatever. Yeah, and J.K. Simmons also a really memorable supporting performance as well.
I really appreciate his performance in this film. I think he's great. And he's like a really like pretty small role, but he has a great he plays a kind of an instrumental role, I feel like, in especially Nicholas Holt's kind of arc in this film.
Yeah. Really the only issue I had with the movie is that you find out pretty early on about Nicholas Holt's connection to this case. I wish they would have held off a little bit longer in the movie. I wish they would have waited. I don't need it to be like a third act reveal, but maybe like a halfway point. Because once you find it out, it is very interesting, it's engaging, but I think it could have had a bigger impact if we waited just a little bit longer into the movie. But that's really my only issue with it.
What I will say is if you haven't seen this movie, it is on Max, it is streaming, go watch it. It's a courtroom drama, and if you're in that kind of world and you like those types of movies, go watch it. Don't watch the trailer, because the trailer gives away his connection pretty quick. And I wish I didn't know that going into it, because then I was waiting for that to happen in the movie, and then when it happened, I was like, okay, now the movie can start, as opposed to kind of your interpretation and viewing experience of it. Nicholas Hoult is really just MVP, like we mentioned earlier, MVP run for 2024, and I didn't expect it, and he's grown on me so much as an actor. Me too. I really do enjoy him, so it's just been awesome to see him just really establish himself as a leading man over the course of this past year. I love, like what you were saying, it gives a fresh take on the courtroom drama and like that 12 Angry Men where because of his connection, he has to give kind of a multifaceted, like double-edged sword role of arguing, because the jury's like, oh, this guy's probably guilty, and Nicholas Hoult, knowing what he knows, he has to be like, well, let's dig into it. Like, he's not guilty, but he also doesn't want them to learn about his connection. So I'm trying to be as vague as possible, because I don't think a lot of people. It's hard. I don't know if a lot of people have seen this movie. It's streaming. Go watch it, because I don't want this movie to get forgotten about. I do think that this is likely Clint Eastwood's best film since probably Gran Torino. You could throw American Sniper in there, but that movie has Bradley Cooper shaking a fake baby doll's hand to make it look like it's alive. So there's issues with that movie, and I think this movie is a really solid courtroom drama thriller, and Nicholas Hoult gives a great performance. So go check it out. Movie I did watch, my Christmas Day watch actually this year, was The Holdovers, which if you watched our Christmas theme episode where we talked about our 5 must-watch films, I will mention this film from last year. I love this movie. It is such a feel-good movie. Sorry, director Alexander Payne, if you don't like that. Alexander Payne is the director of Sideways, Nebraska, The Descendants. This man makes great movies unless it's downsizing. The film stars Paul Giamatti, Dominic Sessa, Divine Joy Randolph, who then won Best Supporting Actress for her role in this movie. It's basically this ragtag group of a student, curmudgeon-y instructor at this New England prep school, and this woman that works in the cafeteria, being stuck at this school over the holiday and not really being able to be in touch with family or friends, and kind of stuck in this one spot. And it's just such a sweet movie. I think there are so many funny moments in this movie. Paul Giamatti gives his best performance, which it really sucks that he went up against Cillian Murphy for Best Actor at the Oscars the year that Cillian Murphy's in Oppenheimer, because it's like, that's a hard one to argue that you're going to win, which I thought he had a chance, but I can't really disagree with Cillian Murphy winning over him. This is a great film. I showed it to my wife. She had never seen it, and it just feels so old school, and the look to it. It has kind of that charm of A Christmas Story, but it's actually a good movie as opposed to A Christmas Story, where that is just a bag of dog shit to me, and it doesn't connect with me. This movie is very emotional. It's relatable, and it has like a lot of good human moments between Paul Giamatti and like other members of his staff, where he's kind of awkward with, but also he's flirtatious with, and it's just like misread signals and stuff. But it is a fantastic Christmas movie. If you haven't seen it, watch it. Corey, I know you've seen this movie. What is your take on The Holdovers? I know we've already kind of briefly touched on this, but just what are your thoughts on this film?
This movie is just like a warm hug of a movie. It's such a cozy movie to watch. It's such an easy movie. I took my mom to see it last Christmas, and we both just absolutely loved it. There's a scene with Davine Jo Randolph when it has to do with her son. Yeah. And it's just a very quiet moment, but it's a very heartfelt moment. That's what this movie is filled with, is scenes like that where, and that could be part of the reason why Paul Giamatti didn't win, is because it's not as like big of a performance as maybe Oppenheimer, which is, that movie needed Cillian Murphy to be big in some scenes. So, this movie is great. I really do love it, and I may still even try and watch it before the end of the year, just because it is a holiday season movie.
You get New Year's Eve in that that spread, because it's over like their winter break, so you get kind of the lead up to Christmas, after Christmas, New Year's Eve, and then everyone's coming back for the spring semester. So it's a good this time of year movie. So if you're like, I'm kind of out of the Christmas spirit, well, watch this. It'll still fit in. So. It's a great film, and I feel like not enough people have seen it. I'm, again, still trying to convince some of my family members to see it, because I know that they haven't.
Yes, that's a great one for sure. Another one I watched that, not necessarily a Christmas movie, but I was in the mood for a snowy type of movie, a wintry season movie. And so I watched The Grey, which came out in 2012, directed by Joe Carnahan, stars Liam Neeson, Frank Grillo, Dermot Mulroney. This movie is essentially about a plane that crashes. I think it's in Alaska, if I remember right.
I believe so.
Or they're going from Alaska. And the plane crashes, and there's a group of survivors dealing with, obviously, the elements and dealing with packs of wolves that are around them, picking them off one by one. And this movie kind of has an interesting history for me, at least, because I remember back in the day when this came out, my dad and I rented this from like a video store, which I miss going to video stores.
Blockbuster.
They were so much fun. Like, we went to a Cashwise video store, and like I'd go there, and I remember getting Captain America: The First Avenger there. Just like, you have certain memories of getting movies. But we got the movie and brought it back to our cabin and started watching it, and like 30 minutes in, my dad really didn't like it, so he turned it off, and I don't know why, and he's like, we're not watching this anymore. And I was like, okay, I guess that's it. And then I bought this movie on Blu-ray like I think about a year ago. And then, the other day I was like, I'm just kind of in the mood to watch a movie, watch this one, and I was really surprised by this movie. It's not a typical action movie of guys fighting wolves in the wilderness. That's not what this is, and I think the trailers kind of sold it as that.
Yeah, they definitely did.
Which a lot of people were upset about that, and especially the ending to this movie, which I won't spoil, but they're just kind of left wanting more, I think. But I just wanted to shout out a couple specific moments in this movie that really elevated this above some of the other Liam Neeson kind of action, quote-unquote, action movies. One is right after the plane crashes, and Liam Neeson's trying to find all the survivors, and there's a scene where a guy is bleeding out, and there's just blood, like, spurting out of this guy, and he's like, everyone around him is like, you gotta save him, you gotta, what do we do to save this guy? And Liam Neeson just, like, looks at him. He's like, you're going to die. He's like, you're not going to make it. But he's like, I want you to think of the best things of your life. I want you to think about the best people in your life. And I want you to go to them right now. He's like, I want your last moments to be thinking of these people and going to them. And it was just really refreshing, because so many movies you see them trying to save them, like put bandages on them, like try and save them, whatever. And it was just a really, really like heartfelt moment. And another just quick moment is Frank Grillo has one towards the end of the movie where he's kind of sitting near this like creek, and it's overlooking this mountain. It's just beautiful shot, and I believe they filmed a lot of stuff on location too, which it looks really good. And he's sitting there, and a few other guys are like, we got to keep moving, man, we got to keep going. And he's just sitting on this log, and he's like, I don't want to go back to my life of working at this like oil refinery. He's like, I'm going to do the same thing every day for the rest of my life. He's like, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And this is the best it's ever going to be. I'm just going to stay here. And like moments like that elevate this movie above other typical, you know, like Liam Neeson action movies where it's actually diving into just the mindset of these characters and really providing some great moments with them. So really enjoy this one. I'm glad I finally got to watch it all these years later.
I love this movie. I saw this movie in theaters in 2012 with my family, so I was in middle school. And I went in seeing the trailers and being like, oh, it's Liam Neeson versus fucking wolves. Hell yeah. After, like, you kind of get that post-Taken, like, vibe. And you're like, yeah, this is going to be such an action thrill ride. And it's not. And it's a slow, not a slow burn, but it's an emotional movie. And it's more worried about the loneliness of these characters and them being stuck here and having to survive as opposed to them fighting. And it's not, well, they fight, but it's not necessarily against the wolves. It's against the environment. They are fucked in this snowy landscape of they're just stranded. And like what you were saying, there's a lot of like good emotional beats and good emotional moments. I remember that scene when he's like, just go to them. Like, and I think Joe Carnahan is kind of an underrated director. I love his action movie, The A-Team. I think that movie is so much fun.
It's fun as shit.
But The Grey, it doesn't get enough credit for being so fresh and creative and original in its approach to these kind of survival type movies. And this movie really has always worked for me. I was really surprised going into it when I was 12 years old, wanting an action movie, and I was like, wow, like this is a sad fucking movie. But it lingers, and it's a movie that I've kind of been able to grow up with, and I really do appreciate kind of what it, like I said, says about loneliness and going back, like Frank Grillo, going back to the life you've lived, and is it worth it? And I don't know, it made me fall in love with the Alaskan wilderness, even though it is fucking meant to be a daunting, scary monument that's just keeping them from safety. There's a couple of really cool shots. Like there's a shot when it's relatively soon after the plane crash. I haven't seen the movie in a couple of years, so I might miss a couple of bits here. But they're lighting torches, and they light the torch, and you see all the glowing eyes of the wolves surrounding them. And I remember that. I think that was even in the trailer, and I was like, oh, it's too good of a movie for how little it's still talked about.
Yeah. Also, one other scene was Liam Neeson just like screaming at the sky at the end when he's like screaming to God, and he's like, if you're real, save me, like do it. And then he just kind of mumbles to himself. He's like, all right, I'll do it myself then.
The ending too, when he finds himself in the den of these wolves, and it's just him, like, and the music kicks in, and he just accepts, like, all right, well, I'm going up against it. I'm gonna likely die. Up against me. I got the alpha literally squaring off against me, and I'm in the wolf's den. Like, I'm gonna die. But he breaks like these little liquor bottles, and he tapes them to his hands, and he tapes a knife to his hand, and he's ready to fight. And the movie is so surprisingly moving for being kind of a movie I expected to be more of an action survival movie. And this movie like I said, it says a lot about loneliness. Liam Neeson's character is suicidal, and you see that pretty early on. It's him kind of at war with himself as he kind of grieves the long lost wife, and he's a widower, like not a widower. Is he widowed? I don't know even the terms, but he's without his wife, and he thinks about her, and he wants to be with her, and that's kind of his motivation to get him through this. And there's a great poem included in the movie that they kind of circle back to a couple of times that I really do appreciate. But I'm very happy you got to finally sit down and watch this movie and finish this movie from that 30-minute little teaser you had of it. Do you have, this is kind of an off-the-topic, slightly question, do you have a favorite movie or a movie that you rented the most at like a movie rental store, whether it was a Cashwise or like a Blockbuster?
I think the first one that came to my mind is there was a video rental store in our hometown of Buffalo, Minnesota called Mr. Movies, which I went to all the time. I remember getting Attack of the Clones so many times.
You said, I need to see all these fucking Jedi again.
Yeah. My parents were probably like, we just watched this last week. Like, you don't want something else? I'm like, nope, I want to watch Attack of the Clones.
Put it in.
Yeah, and it really was so special, like, walking through the store and, like, grabbing the physical copies and, like, looking at the pictures, looking at the back and being like, oh, this movie looks so cool. Mm-hmm. And, like, even video games, too. I remember getting, like, video games renting and, like, you'd have them for a week or a couple days. Mm-hmm. I miss that a lot, for sure.
The one I always went to was Batman Returns, just because it had that, like, there was a Blockbuster in Buffalo, so I'd always go back to the Blockbuster. We went weekly with my family, and we would get a couple of rentals. We'd rent a couple of family movie night movies, and then Mason would get a couple. So my mom was really nice to me, and she let me pick out a couple. And Batman Returns was always one of them. Well, I had a huge crush on Michelle Pfeiffer in that movie, but also the poster on the case, like just the dark silhouettes, and you get the Penguin, Batman, and Catwoman. I'm like, this is so fucking cool. As being a big fan of like the Batman animated series, I was like, this is real. Like, this amazing movie. So that is easily the movie I likely have rented the most in my life, and I really miss Blockbuster dearly. I remember when my family was like, Blockbuster's closing, we're just gonna have to get Netflix. I cried on my bathroom floor about that. I was like, what are you talking about? Like,
did you go to the like Blockbuster sale in Buffalo where they were selling everything? I did too.
I got a number of, I think my family still has a number of movies from that. We have like Superbad and shit like that. I
still have Open Season 3 on DVD. It was
crazy.
Great.
Like I said, I wish we could go back to that. Fuck streaming. Another weekly kind of update that we've been giving for a TV show is Creature Commandos. Episode 5 did come out just this past week. It also, before we get into episode 5, it did get renewed for a season 2, which I didn't know if that was necessarily something that they were planning on doing. If they do, by all means, please continue, because anytime I get to see Weasel fucking squeal a little bit and then hobble over to something, I laugh and die every time. But episode 5 did drop this past week. It was called, I believe, The Iron Pot. Corey, I know you watched it. We've talked about it a little bit before we started recording. What were your thoughts on this most recent episode?
The show just continues to be so much fun. It does everything well of providing backstory for the characters. And just so many funny moments, so many great moments of action, some good moments of heart. It's everything James Gunn does well with a ensemble piece, and I'm really excited to see like where this season ends up, because I think they're at a point now where it's kind of a lot of different characters in different places trying to do one thing, and I'm curious to see how that goes.
Yeah, I fucking love David Harbour as Frankenstein so much, and the inclusion before the show started, and when I found out who all was involved in the Creature Commandos, and you got the Bride and you got Frankenstein, I was like, really? I don't know if I need DC's interpretation of these characters, knowing that there is like some comic background to them, not necessarily that they're made specifically for this show. But I was like, I don't know if like that's gonna work for me. David Harbour is so funny in this episode. I rewatched his bits with Rick Flag of just their banter, and there's a moment in this episode where Rick Flag takes a phone call where he's trying to contact the princess of this fictional country that they're supposedly protecting, and you hear Frankenstein in the back like trying to just argue like, hey, tell them that I'm a changed man and that I'm good now. Like, it's just some bullshit, and it's so funny to me. That, and like there's a situation where he needs to hide, and he's hiding behind this bird cage, and he's a big man. He's Frankenstein. He's massive. And he's hiding behind a bird cage, and Rick Flag looks at him and he's like, really? And he just says, I don't give a shit.
I don't give a shit.
Yeah. I love David Harbour as Frankenstein. There's some really cool action. I've been kind of blown away by the brutality they've included within the action in this series so far. Especially with Dr. Phosphorus towards the end of this episode, he is just melting people. There's a point where he's just dropping his trow, taking his jacket off, taking all of his clothes off, and this tank is approaching him, and he just lets it hit him, and he melts through the tank, flicks off the two drivers of the tank, and burns a hole in the shape of his middle finger through the... I don't even care if I'm spoiling this episode. It's amazing.
It's incredible.
Go watch it. It's, again, every week, 22 episodes of just amazing animated hilarity and violence that I just can't wait. If they do a season 2, I'll be watching it every night the moment it drops every episode. Don't know if I need a season 2, but again, I am so excited. I can't wait for this season to wrap up and see where it goes with the characters. I love this show so much. But Corey, there's another show that I know you've been watching. What are your thoughts on Dune Prophecy?
Dune Prophecy wrapped up pretty recently, and this is just strictly off of my love for the two Denis Villeneuve Dune movies, and I was just kind of had the itch to get more from this universe. This show is very okay. It's 6 episodes in this first season. I think the first half is pretty slow and a little, and I hate using the word boring. I just feel like that is like, oh, you just don't like slow dialogue stuff. But I think the show really struggles in the first 3 episodes to focus on the important characters and the important storylines. In the back half, it definitely gets more interesting. There's some cool narrative elements that they go for that I enjoyed. What I will say is great about the show is the visual aspect of it. It's insane that they can do this on TV. It still will always baffle me that it looks like the same quality as the Dune movies in parts. So the cinematography, I mean, again, the production design, costumes, everything looks absolutely incredible. Performances are all good in this show as well. Emily Watson, Olivia Williams, Travis Fimmel, Mark Strong plays the Emperor, and he's Mark Strong. He's always great.
Yeah.
I just think where this show struggles is really having a singular focus on the right characters and on the right stories, because I think they get it a little bit right in the back half of the show, but it just is kind of a slog through some of the early parts, and even in some of the last episodes, I'm like dozing off and I have to like go back and rewind, because I just like, unfortunately, like it's a very cool world, but I feel like they are hitting some points really well, and then other times they are trying to hit on elements of the Dune movies and be like, hey, remember this thing? Remember this planet? Remember this family name? Like, that you should, like, you guys know this, right? Like,
it's almost like clickbait. It's just like, settle
yeah,
down.
it's the member berries thing of like, hey, you guys remember those things that you liked from Dune Part 2, huh? Like, so it struggles with that a bit. I don't think it's an awful season, but I don't think it's something for like just a mainstream audience to watch. If you love the Dune movies and the Dune world, I think it's cool to get a different glimpse 10,000 years before the Dune movies take place to see what the Bene Gesserit were doing. But for just like a casual watcher, I don't think that it's not as big of a draw. So yeah, I don't know. A little mixed on this one. It's very okay. I know this also has a season 2 coming out, so I'm curious to see what they do with that.
I haven't watched any of this show yet, and I am a massive fan of the first couple of books that I've been able to read so far. I read Dune and I read Dune Messiah. I am working my way through Children of Dune, which I'll likely actually probably try and take on my honeymoon with me and finish that book out. I love Dune Part 1. Dune Part 2, like I said, I think is the best film to be released since I've been alive. And I'm very excited to revisit this world. I think as we approach Dune Messiah, that's when I'll kind of get geared up to really get into this show and kind of anticipation and excitement for that new Denis Villeneuve film. So I haven't touched it yet, haven't looked at it yet, haven't watched it yet. From what I've heard from you and from the majority of critics I've seen, it is kind of a lukewarm response to this first season, almost kind of in comparison to how a lot of people have reacted to the first season of Rings of Power I've seen, of like, it's like good enough but not great. It's not to where it should be, but it's more backstory basically. But I'm excited to at some point hopefully sit down and watch it, and if there's a season 2 like you mentioned, then I'll be stacking up some homework here. But moving on into the new releases coming out on January 3rd, we do have one re-release, a Netflix release, and a theatrical release. The theatrical release is a smaller film, which I did not hear about until I saw the show notes that Corey put together for this episode. But it is a movie called The Damned. It is directed by Thorder Paulson.
Attaboy.
I hope that was as good as I possibly can with that, so if I mispronounced the name, I am sorry. The film stars Odessa Young and Joe Cole. The synopsis, which I know you're all going to need because you've never heard of this film, a 19th century widow has to make an impossible choice when, during an especially cruel winter, a foreign ship sinks off the coast of her Icelandic fishing village. we watched the trailer before we started recording because I don't think you and I had
Nope.
any background knowledge on this film. The trailer looks relatively kind of paint by numbers in terms of like what a horror trailer should look like. It did kind of, not to harken back to what we mentioned about the last voyage of the Demeter, it kind of gave me a little bit of that feel to it, and I wouldn't be surprised if this film is actually like a kind of a hidden gem at the beginning of 2025. It's kind of nice. Like, I don't know. It's exciting because I feel like January used to be just the shit dumping grounds for movies at the start of a year. And I feel like these past couple of years, there's been some work done to kind of rehabilitate January in terms of what's released during that month. So I'm hopeful that this movie is good. I don't know if I'm necessarily going to be rushing out to check it out in theaters. Corey, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, we watched the trailer like, an hour ago or something. It looks okay. It looks like it could be. I like the time period, and I like the kind of like Icelandic feel to it. That's interesting. So it could be cool. The re-release that you mentioned is Seven, or Sesevenin, as I like to say, because that is how the title actually is. There's a 7 as the V, which doesn't really make sense. But
I wonder if this was like the start of Hollywood putting like Fant Four Stick, like shit like that.
Yeah.
Like, is this like the unsolicited, impromptu start of this horrible titling kind of pattern that we've seen
even
throughout
if
Hollywood?
you turn the 7 to like sort of look like a V, it's still very off. It's not parallel. It doesn't make sense. Whatever. Seven's a great movie. It's one of David Fincher's best. Obviously, Morgan Freeman, Brad Pitt, Kevin Spacey, Gwyneth Paltrow. It's a great detective story. Hunting for a serial killer. I love this movie. I think it's great. I don't know if it's going to be like in IMAX theaters around us, but if it is near you and you've never seen the movie or want to watch it again, definitely go check it out, because it is one of my, probably in my like top 30 favorite movies of all time.
This is, and I've said this a lot, this is one of my favorite movies ever made. It is in my top 10. If you want to guess what number 7 is in my top 10, I'll give you a hint. It's number fucking 7. I love this movie. I think it is the best crime thriller detective story. It is my favorite David Fincher film. I missed Interstellar on its re-release. I think I'm gonna need to see this in theaters just because there's specific shots I can envision that I'm like, oh, just like the Brad Pitt out in the rain in the alleyway, and you see the gun barrel of John Doe line up on his head, and it's like John Doe's face is hidden in darkness and in shadow, but you see the gun barrel. I'm like, oh, just thinking about that on a big screen is just, I'm already getting excited. So I love David Fincher. I'm pretty sure there's a new coming out eventually. There's a new 4K release, or potentially a steelbook for this film. I don't know. It might not be a steelbook. It might just be a new 4K. But David Fincher's releases, physical media releases for his films, are always a little weird, and they always do like a little book thing. So I'm hoping that this is just
the spine is on the wrong side.
It's just dog shit.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, why do you have to be so extra? Just release like a standard 4K or a Blu-ray. And I think this looks kind of like a normal 4K, so maybe I'll have to pick that up too. So I'm really excited by 7 being back out in theaters, and like I said, I will likely be trying to catch this one in theaters. One that you won't be able to catch in theaters, coming straight to Netflix, doesn't mean I'm not excited for it. Wallace and Gromit, Vengeance Most Foul, directed by Merlin Crossingham and Nick Park, starring Ben Whitehead, Peter Kay, Lauren Patel. It's another Wallace and Gromit movie. The synopsis here the film focuses on Gromit's concern that Wallace is overdependent on his inventions, which proves justified when Wallace invents a smart gnome that seems to develop a mind of its own. Little artificial intelligence, potentially. I am super excited to sit down and watch this, as I am a huge fan of Wallace and Gromit: Curse of the Were-Rabbit. I think stop motion animation may be my favorite form of animation, just because you could see the work on display like tenfold. And whenever you see it behind the scenes, like I remember I went and saw Coraline when it re-released this past year, and you see a little behind the scenes making a featurette where it's just frame by frame them meticulously like molding and forming different movements, and it's just like the amount of respect I have for someone to have that amount of patience in something that they're creating. I can't wait. So I forget when this movie's coming out, and I've gone on Netflix a number of times to watch this movie thinking it was out, and then it's like, you can watch the trailer coming out January 3rd. I'm like, fuck off, I want to watch it right now. So I'm excited. I will definitely be watching this the moment I can. Corey, what about you with Wallace and Gromit Vengeance Most Fowl?
This is the Wallace and Gromit movies. I'm actually kind of behind. Like, I haven't seen a lot of them. I've seen parts of them. But this one is getting into the best animated feature conversation a little bit. I don't think this one really has a great chance to win, but certainly if it's nominated, I'll definitely check this out because, like you said, stop motion is great. And I'd definitely be curious to check this one out.
Mm-hmm. Moving on into our physical media roundup, coming out this upcoming Tuesday, which is, I believe, the 31st of December. I will touch on what we purchased lately here in a second, but we did make kind of a glaring error last week saying that the Snake Eyes 4K and Internal Affairs 4K was coming out. That's actually this week. Christmas Eve, nothing was released. We're just a couple of idiots just trying our best.
Dumb.
So we screwed the pooch on that one.
Screwed the
pooch. But this week you can look forward to Snake Eyes 4K and the Internal Affairs 4K being two of the major releases coming to physical media this upcoming Tuesday. What I've purchased lately, and this kind of ties back to me watching The Holdovers, there is a scene where Dominic Sessa is really just laying into Paul Giamatti's character, asking him with a bunch of questions, and Paul Giamatti says, "What is this, Nuremberg?" And I was like, like Judgment at Nuremberg, like that old 1960s movie I've never seen but always heard about. So I went and bought it on Blu-ray, have that being delivered tomorrow, so I will sit down to watch that 3-hour and 6-minute, I think, courtroom drama sometime hopefully this weekend. And then me and Corey have been wrapping up our Christmas kind of long-winded celebration. I did get from him a 4K copy of Wild Robot, which is still my favorite animated film of 2024, and I can't wait to rewatch because that movie just, in terms of emotions, it fucking beat me with a shovel. I loved it. Damn. Corey, was there anything this week that you did pick up? Otherwise, if you want to rehash the Snake Eyes 4K and Internal Affairs 4K conversation from last week, we can even entertain that.
I really don't.
That's fine.
We don't have much to add. I did not pick up anything this week. I have to get new rear brakes on my car, so that kind of takes precedent over this. Unfortunately, it's squeaking like a motherfucker, and I
Minnesota winter.
Yeah, I gotta get them replaced, and I'm like, all right, we're in fucking December, January now, so gotta get those replaced. So that's where my money's going. But moving into some movie news now. One of the big fucking things that we've been talking about, casting news for a while, is Christopher Nolan's new movie. We've been giving you some updates on who's been cast in the movie. Finally announced that he is doing an adaptation of the Odyssey, which they gave a description, which is a mythic action epic shot across the world using brand new IMAX film technology. I don't know what that means, but I know it's going to look fucking awesome.
It's going to be insane. I can't wait.
So yeah, for those of you who may not be familiar, the Odyssey follows Odysseus after the Trojan War and his journey back home, and just kind of the different experiences he has on that journey. And I mean, this is really cool new territory for Nolan to dive into, because it's really been like some true story stuff with Oppenheimer, comic book stuff, and then his weird time obsession that he has and putting that in every movie, which I love. But this movie is going to be epic as fuck.
Yeah, and this is, like you said, uncharted territory for him. I feel like in terms of epic, in story, Oppenheimer, kind of an epic. In scale, it's not an epic. I'm excited to see him take on a big mythical poem, an epic poem. One of my favorite things I've ever read is Homer's The Odyssey. And I just saw a somewhat decent, lackluster interpretation of a portion of the Odyssey earlier this year with The Return. So the fact that this announcement came and it's, hey, Nolan is making the Odyssey. I can only think of maybe two directors that I would be more excited about making an adaptation of the Odyssey. And that'd be Denis Villeneuve and maybe Martin Scorsese. But you got Christopher Nolan coming in doing the Odyssey. I am so stoked. And now I'm just like, all right, well, with the cast that we have announced, who's going to be playing Odysseus? Like, is it Matt Damon? Are you going to do Robert Pattinson? Like, who are you going with? Which, either of those two, amazing. If it's someone that you haven't casted yet, can't wait, because you have a star-studded cast so far. So I am so excited for this. I know it's going to look great. I'm excited to see how he handles kind of the scale of this film. One critique I would say, Aside from some of the sound mixing in Nolan's films, that's kind of something he gets kind of harped on for. The action in his films hasn't been like the biggest standout for me. Especially in like the Batman movies, my biggest complaint with his Dark Knight trilogy is that Batman only fights with his fucking elbows. He's all elbows. He's stiff-necked. He has a very limited range of motion. I'm really excited to see how he kind of takes, yes, the scale of this film and approaches that, but also I wonder how he will kind of show Odysseus as being such an accomplished warrior, which not necessarily being the biggest kind of focal point of this story. It's his return, his voyage home, but action is definitely an aspect of an epic like this, so I'm very excited to see him tackle the Odyssey. Can't fucking wait. With having the Superman trailer last week, big news event. Having the Odyssey, almost for me, as big as the Superman trailer. I can't wait for both of these developments. Moving on, kind of coinciding with that Superman trailer from last week, there was an interview I saw with James Gunn. But Supergirl, the Woman of Tomorrow, will begin filming after Superman. And in an interview with Collider, James Gunn mentioned that he didn't necessarily plan on Supergirl being kind of the second movie in this new DCU, but he cites the incredible script that he has received as kind of a deciding factor to move forward. I also forgot the director of this film is Craig Gillespie? Director of Dumb Money and I, Tonya, both films I haven't seen Dumb Money. That's a movie I missed. I know you like that movie.
I love that movie so much.
I love I, Tonya, and I think he's an interesting choice for a movie like this. So I know he's attached to direct. The film is slated for June 26, 2026. I can't wait. We mentioned the trailer last week. Kind of not a concern, but a hesitation I have about the film is with all those characters, how does Supergirl kind of fit into this world? So I'm excited to see what they do with Supergirl. I'm interested to see, again, with James Gunn referencing like an amazing script, confidence in the director. This is going to be the second film in the DCU. Corey, what are your thoughts on Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow?
I'm really excited. I love Millie Alcock from her role as Rhaenyra Targaryen in House of the Dragon. She's been a standout for me. She was mainly in season 1, but just absolutely incredible, and I'd love to see her get in a lead role. And Craig Gillespie, I, Tonya is fucking awesome. Dumb Money is a really cool and enjoyable movie. And then he also did a movie called The Finest Hours in 2016.
With Chris Pine, yes.
Yeah, very underrated movie. Just a weird, quick little side story. I saw The Finest Hours because when I tried to go see Deadpool in theaters, they were like, hey, are you 17? And I was like, eh. And they're like, okay. And then they were like, do you want to see something else? And I was like looking up at the board, and I'm like, I'll see The Finest Hours, I guess. And I saw it, and I'm like, oh, this movie's actually like really good. Yeah. And nobody's talking about it. So he has a great track record, and I think it looks really fun, and I'm excited to, just especially seeing her in Superman, kind of the tone they're going for there, and seeing how they translate it into a movie of her own. Moving into a couple trailers, kind of peeks at movies. Two that I'm not actually really that excited for. One is Snow White, the live-action one, because why not? Let's do live-action ones of every movie. We got a new, was it a trailer, like a sneak peek?
It was like a first look, kind of almost for
whatever.
It wasn't. I don't think it was a trailer. It's almost a teaser.
Dwarves looked like shit. Whatever.
I didn't even watch this.
I didn't either.
I don't care enough. I don't want this movie. I like Rachel Ziegler, but I don't want this movie.
Yeah, I don't know. The original is great, and we don't need this. Happy Gilmore 2. I don't know if I've actually seen the first Happy Gilmore all the way through. I don't love Adam Sandler comedies, so this one, you see Travis Kelce in it.
Yeah,
and
that you do.
That's it.
I like Happy Gilmore, and I grew up with Happy Gilmore and Billy Madison. Those were like the two Adam Sandler movies, which Adam Sandler comedies now don't work for me. Unless it's like Just Go With It. That movie works for me. And it's coming straight to Netflix, so I'm like, it's probably not the best sign. It's slated for 2025. Travis Kelce's in the trailer, because why not? It just kind of, like, the trailer doesn't show a whole lot, but you see, like, Bad Bunnies in it. It just feels like Adam Sandler's, like, getting together a group of his friends, kind of like what he does in the Grown Ups films and Hoobie Halloween, which, when he teams up with Netflix, like, I was telling this to Corey, I think there's one film, like, that he's done with Netflix that was at least somewhat good, and it's You Are So Not Invited to My Bat Mitzvah, a film I actually relatively enjoyed.
But then you get Hubie Halloween, you get, like, Murder Mystery. Adam Sandler, you're not funny to me. But Happy Gilmore, it was funny to me when I was 8. So maybe, who knows? Maybe I haven't changed that much. Maybe 25-year-old Mason is going to love Happy Gilmore again. I think the trailer, it is a teaser. It does do a good attempt at kind of getting people into that nostalgia of like, oh, he's putting on the Boston Bruins jersey like he always did, and he's doing that three-step swing that he's kind of known for, and you see Shooter McGavin, and it's really like kind of tugging on the nostalgia while also showing you like, why is Travis Kelce here? Why is Bad Bunny here? Like random shit, but it's a streaming release, so I'm sure I'll catch it when I'm liquored up a little bit or something, or one of my brothers will tell me like, it's not that bad, you should check it out, and I'll watch it and hate it. So I don't know, I'm sure my brother Austin is gonna love this movie. But yeah, Happy Gilmore 2, Snow White, sweet, happy that those are fucking getting made, I guess. One thing I wanted to touch base on, it's not the most monumental in terms of movie news, but a story that just took me completely off guard. One of the CEOs of Sony is kind of stepping down, so their film division at least. I'm going to try his name. I did not rehearse this at all. Tony Vinciquerro, I'm going to say. He's stepping down on January 2nd, but he has some blame to dish out for the failure of Kraven the Hunter and the Sony Spider-Man-less Spider-Verse films. In an interview with the LA Times, he spoke about the studio's success during his tenure, but he said, let's touch on Madam Web for a moment. Madam Web underperformed in the theaters because the press just crucified it. This part I underlined. It was not a bad film, and it did great on Netflix, which is surely the measure of anything of quality. He continued leaning into blaming the press for Madam Web's failure, and others. For some reason, the press decided that they didn't want us making these films out of Kraven and Madam Web, and the critics just destroyed them. They also did it with Venom, but the audience loved Venom and made Venom a massive hit. Underlined this portion, coming up, these are not terrible films. They were just destroyed by the critics in the press for some reason.
Shut the fuck up, Tony.
You're an idiot. To fucking stand on, you're gonna die on that hill. You're tenured. You're stepping down from Sony in January, and you're gonna die on the hill that the Sony Spider-Verse was just lambasted for no reason. These films were aside from, I would say, the first two Venom films, these films were some of the biggest pieces of just atrocious, lackluster, lazy, sloppy, thrown together dog water bullshit I've ever seen. And Madam Web is like fine enough to watch drunk. Kraven,
that's why it did well on Netflix.
Yeah. Madam Web, you get drunk with some friends and you laugh at the movie, not with it. Kraven, you're better off having Dirty Harry bury you 6 feet under than watching that fucking movie. Dog shit.
This is the dangerous thing about having a movie be successful like Venom 1 and 2.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, we got something cooking. And it's like, no. You had Tom Hardy, who's enjoyable as fuck in these movies.
And you have a semi-recognizable character in Venom.
Yeah, people know Venom. He's been in a Spider-Man movie before. He's a big character in the animated stuff. Like, for him to say, like, oh, it's just the critics. Like, there are times when critics are too harsh on things, but for the most part, they give a general vibe of like, yeah, this isn't really good. These movies are fucking shit. That's why you don't have any more coming out.
Well, that, and when people, I'm understanding to a degree, but when people are say like, oh, like critics are always wrong, I always go with like, if you're gonna break down to Rotten Tomatoes, I always go with the audience review. The critics are always wrong. I'm not gonna. The critics, this is their profession. They are basically employed to watch films. They see 80 films a year. And I'm going to take their word for what they saw in this film versus Joe Schmo, who watches 2 movies a year and lives on his mom's fucking couch, okay? I'm going to listen to the critic, not the audience member. So I don't care if the critic score for this movie is at a 37. I'm not, and the audience review is at a 79. This movie sucks, apparently, to the critics. I'll give it a chance, but
the critics are giving me a pretty fair warning that this movie might be ass. I'm not going to look at that audience review for dick. I don't associate with audience. I see 50 to 60 movies a year. If a critic says something can objectively label things in a film and say it's good, bad, whatever, I'm going to take their word for it. If an audience member is like, you know what? My popcorn was bad at this theater when I saw this movie. The movie wasn't that good either. 1 star. Fuck you. What does that mean? So, I don't know. And this asshat saying this stupid shit, oh, these movies got bad reviews and the critics didn't want these to be good films. No one does that unless you're a Snyder cunt, okay? I don't know if we can say that word.
Fuck it.
I already did. So, but they didn't get hate before. Craven had pretty decent first reactions before it actually opened. And granted, those first reactions are coming from people that are really excited to see this film opening day, and they're kind of sugar-coated by the excitement. But to blame it on reviews and then say, well, it did well on Netflix, sir, you're dumb.
This is the issue with CEOs and other heads of studios that are not film fans. Most of the times, where they just have this idea
the business
of business, of the money, and it is really sad because they just a lot of times don't care about the quality of stuff. So it's just such a crazy statement to say.
Also, like, why die on that hill? That's so late in the game,
Dude,
too,
like,
in terms of
you're
you
retiring in
yeah.
like fucking 3 days or some shit.
What do you have to do? Like, why are you trying to fight for this? That has no point in being fought.
Yeah.
Anyways, just wanted to highlight some stupidity on display in terms of the world of movies. Something that is a bit discombobulating or annoying sometimes is when release schedules kind of get switched around. Especially if you're in the movie Mickey 17, that I think has had maybe 6 to 7, 8, 20 release dates in the past couple of years. But Mickey 17 and Sinners I wanted to bring up. They switched release dates. So Mickey 17 now still releasing in 2025, but now will be releasing on March 7th. Whereas Sinners will be taking the April 18th, 2025, which Mickey 17 originally had. Again, release dates kind of shuffle. It gets to be annoying. But, Corey, there's a movie that I feel like has shuffled release dates to a more drastic degree that has been more grating, annoying, and frustrating. At least in recent memory that I, like...
For you and I personally,
making
too.
my hair turn gray and fall out. Corey, what is that movie that also just received a delay this year?
So, for probably like the 8th fucking time, the Batman 2 delayed another year.
A full year.
To October 1st, 2027, which doesn't sound like a real year. This movie has been delayed so many times, and it's very frustrating because we obviously want to see the fucking movie, but I also want them to take time and make this movie good. I don't know that you need 5 years in between the first one to do that. I think you could have done 3 to 4 years, and that would have been great. But the thing that's worrying me the most about this is that there's been discussions that they want to bring Robert Pattinson's Batman into the DCU and make him the prime Batman. We don't have that confirmed. We don't know that that's the case.
There's just been the speculation.
It's just rumors you see around. But this being delayed, a part of me is like, oh, is that because they need to fit this into the DC universe and they're reworking some parts of it? Or is there... I don't know. There's Matt Reeves doing something else, but I don't think he is. Yeah. I don't know. Just finish the movie and please give us the fucking movie. We want to see this shit.
I don't really buy in too much to the rumors of the Matt Reeves trying to work this Batman into the new DCU with James Gunn. To me, this just screams Matt Reeves works slow. And I feel like this has been an issue in years past. I'm pretty sure this is why, like, an issue that they had with the Dawn of the Planet of the Apes and War of the Planet of the Apes. He's a slow-working creative. And granted, Penguin did just come out, so he does have a project kind of facilitating a transition between Batman and Batman 2. But, it's been over 2 years since the last Batman, and the script still isn't finished? Matt Reeves, you're lazy. Your professional job is to write and create and make films. And it's taken you 2 years to maybe write an 180-page screenplay that you're happy with. Maybe you shouldn't be in charge of this. And I remember there was because this is the second time this film has been delayed in 2024. I remember there was a post on it, and I commented, dude,
get off your ass and finish writing your fucking script on this post. And people went after me. He's an artist, not a printer. Shove it up your fucking crooked twat, okay? It does. An artist doesn't need 8 years to come up with something smart. If he's good at what he does, which he's proven he is, because I love the Batman. His Planet of the Apes movies are amazing. He can make a fucking script. He just needs to sit down and do it. And I'm getting to the point where I'm very frustrated, but I'm also just so stoked for this movie whenever it does come out that I'm gonna see it opening day. But I'm so just annoyed with the delays of this film, which they've referenced as being a VFX-heavy film. And I'm like, is it really that, or are you just trying to cover up for something else? Because if it is a VFX-heavy film, you need a finished script, you need to be shooting, you need to have stuff ready to have VFX worked on. Like, I don't know if I buy into that, but every delay, I don't question that this movie's going to come out. I just question if I'm going to be excited to see it.
It's certainly frustrating. I've just seen online a lot of the discussion about this delay. I've seen a lot of people being like, just cancel the movie, just stop.
No.
And what I will say is that, yes, it is frustrating that Matt Reeves is taking a long time to finish the script and to start production on this movie. But once this movie comes out, and hopefully it's good. I mean, I'm sure it'll be at least a good follow-up to the first one. We're not going to be talking about the delay. Mm-hmm. We're not going to be talking about the time in between movies. We're going to be talking about the quality of the movie. And so that's what I'm excited for. It's just getting to that point of actually being there. So, yes, it's a setback. And, it would have been sweet to have Batman 2, Dune Messiah, and the Odyssey in the same fucking year. That would be tits.
I posted something on the story of our Instagram because that was a thing that was going around. Like, you got the Odyssey, you got Dune Messiah, you got Batman 2, and then that lasted all of 4 days before they pushed Batman 2 again. So, I don't know. It's frustrating. I almost wish that they wouldn't announce a release date for this film. And if they just announced, we get to 2024, we get 2 years off of the Batman coming out. They're like, hey, actually, it's coming out in 2027. I feel like I'd be less annoyed by that as opposed to, shift in date, new date. It's getting repetitive. And with their ability to continuously shift the date, I'm getting worried that it's just, there's a possibility it could get pushed again. So if this is the last time it shifts, thank you, fuck you, finish writing the movie, get the movie out on this date. But if you push it again, god damn it, what is going on? There's got to be issues. What is happening?
Yeah.
But I don't know.
It's I'm still incredibly excited. Maybe my most anticipated movie, on the docket. I can't wait to see this movie. So we'll maybe in a few months we'll have another update about it being pushed to 2029 or some bullshit. Speaking about a movie that has come out and came out a long ass fucking time ago, in 1966, it's our movie rewind of the week: The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. A Western classic, a classic film for every genre, not just Westerns, but just how to do a movie. Directed by Sergio Leone. This is the third movie in the Man with No Name trilogy, following A Fistful of Dollars and For a Few Dollars More. It is about a bounty hunting scam who joins two men in an uneasy alliance against the third in a race to find a fortune in gold buried in a remote cemetery. Clint Eastwood, Eli Wallach, Lee Van Cleef. This movie fucking hits. Mm-hmm. The score of this movie is one of the most iconic scores of all time that has been spoofed and used so many times that people probably don't realize it's from this movie.
Yeah.
And it is, I think it is my favorite Western of all time. This movie is so enjoyable. It's so influential. I absolutely love watching this movie. And I will say, A Fistful of Dollars and For a Few Dollars More are very underrated. I don't think people talk about them enough. They're both really great.
I feel like they're kind of forgotten about, especially when you have The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly to go up against. Because just the title alone is so recognizable and just so damn, that's a good-ass title. You got Ennio Morricone with one of the best, most recognizable film scores ever to date. This film did release in 1966. It did have, in the United States, a release of December 29th, 1967. It did release in a couple of other countries beforehand. I feel kind of like a fat kid in a candy shop being able to talk about Seven, the same episode as The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, another one of my favorite films, one of my top Westerns ever made. what a fucking... Not only is it just a great Western, it is such a fun movie. And it's just full of people turning on each other, double crosses, just like everyone's going for different things. Clint Eastwood is amazing. I love him, obviously, in his Westerns, and we're blessed to still be able to have him, again, making films like The Juror Number 2. So I love this movie. I saw it when I was relatively young, and this is a long movie, but it never loses momentum. I never once got bored during it. It's always fun with the action, the score. There's good comedy to be had. I can't say enough good things about this film. And A Fistful of Dollars and For a Few Dollars More. Those are great, almost lead-ups into this culmination of just Western greatness from the 60s. And that fucking showdown of all three of them at the end. And the score's going just hog wild in the background as you get those close-ups of their eyes just darting back, and they're making their decisions without saying anything or trying to show their hand, basically, and then they all
It's perfect. It's great.
It has to be one of the most flawless made films ever in the world. And I love this movie. I don't think a lot of people our age have seen this movie. I think a lot of people recognize it and are able to see kind of the influence it has in pop culture, the music, the how much of a classic it is. People recognize it for that. But I wish more people our age especially would sit down and be like, you know what? It's from the 60s. It's 3 hours long, but it's a reason why it's recognizable. There's a reason why it's a classic. I feel like movies like this kind of get lost in the shuffle, at least with our generation, and it kind of bothers me because if I bring it up, they're like, well, yeah, okay, yeah, sure, I'm not going to, like, I have coworkers and friends and family members that are like, a movie older than 20 years, like, older than 2000.
I hate that.
It's an old movie and I'm never going to watch it. Oh, a movie's in black and white. Not to say that Good, Bad, and the Ugly is in black and white, but it is an old film. It's in black and white. I'm not going to watch it. People... If you want to watch quality, go back and look at the movies that built us up to this point. The Good and the Bad and the Ugly basically does every Western trope to the best ever because it created a lot of Western tropes. It is the movie to go to look at as an example. It's on the Mount Rushmore of Western films for me. I don't know if it's necessarily my quintessential Western favorite. Another Clint Eastwood Western, The Unforgiven, a movie that I revisited. Actually, I do really enjoy, and I'd probably put up there with this. But yeah, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. What a fucking fantastic time this is to sit down and watch. And the movie clips along. It's paced super well. The action is good. It's just such a good time, and the characters are fun. Oh, I fucking love this movie.
Watch it if you haven't seen it. It's incredible.
If you haven't seen it, I'm not going to yell at you for not having seen it, because I know a lot of people probably haven't seen it, at least our age. But do yourself a favor. You won't be mad. Go back and watch it. If you don't love it, you'll at least like it. And if you like it, maybe you should just try and watch it again and see if you love it. But anyways, moving on from that, thank you guys for sitting down and having some good old liquor drinks with us for our 9th episode of Slate Night, the Film Fan Podcast. Be sure to follow us on Instagram for more in-depth movie reviews and news, and subscribe to our podcast on basically wherever you get your podcast, whether it's Apple Music, Spotify, Amazon Music. I honestly don't know the list of any other options. There's others. I don't know.
Freaks that listen to whatever the fucking...
We paid for distribution to these other sites that I've never heard of. Also, while you're at it, if you could, please leave us a review and let us know how we're doing. This is a show that we've kind of been able to have a blast producing and putting out this year. It's something that Corey and I have talked about a lot. And as we move into 2025, we kind of hope to be able to refine the show further, refine our Instagram presence further, maybe make a website, and maybe even make a jump to YouTube. Not to show our hand too much, but we are having a good time putting this together, even if we don't really have just the largest following in the world. But do what you can. If there's anything you think we could do better, let us know in the nicest way possible while still giving us 5 stars if you would. In the world of film, it's not just about what's on the screen, but also it's about who's sitting next to you in the theater. From Corey and I at Slate Night, I'd like to say that is a wrap.